Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Carrie Donegan, and you are watching or listening to Radical Age Reversal. And I'm so glad you're here. We are here to find secrets to the longevity code. And today we're continuing in our book, Eat to Beat Your Diet. One of my newest favorite authors is Dr. William Li, and he is giving us the best tips I have heard in a long time, mostly because they're really practical and easy to understand. The pages that we're going to be covering today, in case you have purchased the book already, starts on page 42, and we're going to go all the way to 47. Today's focus is on fat as an endocrine organ. So, what does that mean? It means that your endocrine system is your system of hormones. There are so many hormones in our body, and we need them all. And without fat, guess what? We don't actually produce them. So, yet another reason why fat is important. Remember, though, we're trying to get to that Goldilocks spot. What does that mean? It means that you don't want to be too fat, but you also don't want to be under fat. And so, finding the spot that works best for you is critical and absolutely necessary when it comes to avoiding cardiometabolic issues and also achieving really great longevity, not just aging to a ripe old age, but also living in a very healthy way during those years. So I think that is the goal for all of us because that's why you're here. And I have been looking in this chapter, I've been studying this chapter, and I have to tell you, this one's a little bit hard to remember because of all the names. And so we're going to boil it down for you and give you a very easy way to remember the important aspects of this chapter. I want you to remember that leaders act right. All right. We want our leaders to be good leaders. We just had an election, and I know that forefront in most of the people's minds when they were placing their vote was which leader is going to act right, to do the right thing. And so when it comes to your hormone health and it comes to fat, we're going to remember leaders act right. So, what does that mean? Let's go back first and follow his explanation as to what your endocrine system is and how fat plays a role. So, he says on page 42, fat is a gland that releases hormones. So, without your fat, you don't have the capacity to do that. Fat hormones control many body functions. So it's not just your sex organs. We're talking about a lot of other things. You might be surprised to learn that fat is the largest gland in your body. So, can you name another gland? Probably what comes to mind is either pituitary, thyroid, or adrenals. But we know we have many other glands, and fat is a gland, which I think is really interesting. It's made up of something called adipocytes, which release hormones into the lacy network of blood vessels that penetrate and feed fat tissue. Remember, go back to some of our earlier discussions when we talked about angiogenesis, the production of those very vital blood vessels necessary to transfer food to your fat. Now, if you want to lose weight, you need to cut that blood supply off. But if you are trying to produce good hormones, you need that blood pathway. So the Goldilocks point is what we're looking to achieve. Your circulation then carries fat hormones to other parts of the body. So honestly, it seems pretty simple. You have a fat organ, it has a lacy network of vascular veins, it carries the hormones to the organs through that very complicated network of blood vessels. Now, what do? They deliver instructions. Okay, so they're like the post office, right? So they're transporting messages, letters to different parts of your body. Now, hormones work very much like an on and off switch. I think that's really important. And when we talk about it in science, we talk about up regulating and down regulating. But you can go ahead and think of it as turning on and turning off. I think that can be really helpful in terms of thinking about what's going on in your body. So, there are at least 15 different kinds of hormones that are released by your fat. They influence the health of your brain, your immune system, your gut, your circulation, your muscles, your reproductive system, which is the one I think most people think about, and your metabolism. That's another one that you may not realize that hormones are really involved in your metabolism. And we're going to drill down into that today. So, collectively, your fat hormones are called adipokines. Okay. So, adipokines or adipokins, depending on how you want to pronounce it. What are they? Things like leptin, adiponectin, and resistin. Those are the things we're going to talk about today. And if you're trying to put things together, what did I say at the beginning of the show? Leaders act right. Leptin, adiponectin, resistin. Okay, so I'm going to show you how it's easy to remember these and what they do. Leptin is known as your satiety hormone. So, what does that mean? It means that it suppresses your appetite. Now, so many people tell me nowadays, I'm hungry all the time. And we're trying to kind of figure out why that is. Is it because our food is so nutrient deficient? Is it because we start our day often with something really sugary and sweet, which burns through our body quickly and makes us want to eat again? Some people say that there are actually chemicals in your food that shut down leptin and turn on ghrelin, which is that hormone that makes you want to be hungry and want to eat. There's probably a whole combination of those three and maybe even more. But we see people are very leptin resistant today. What does that mean? It means that they just don't feel satiated, they don't feel full. And so they keep eating because they're hungry, quite frankly. And a lot of us don't know what hunger really is. Sometimes we feel like it's low energy. Sometimes we feel like it's that gurgling in your stomach, neither of which is true. True hunger comes from a sense of weakness and brain fog. When you get to the point where you really feel like you cannot function, you have no energy whatsoever, and you just want to collapse, that is hunger. And did you know that you can go 40 days really without eating? And although you would be nutrient deficient for sure, and it's not something I would recommend to anyone necessarily, you would still survive because you have fat stores, and those fat stores eventually would start to turn into glycogen because your body is set up for starvation. And so that is why when people are in extreme tragic situations and they are starving, not everyone dies. We know that. Even in countries where they face famine for years upon end, we haven't seen a complete loss of population. So it's not desirable by any means, but just know your body is set up for it and you will be fine. Now, hydration is a whole different question, but we're talking right now just about getting glucose into your body. So, if you cannot make sufficient amount of leptin, you are more susceptible to infection. Did you know that? I didn't know that. So people who are not feeling full, right? People who don't have that automatic on and off switch that they're like, I just ate and it's a few hours later and I want to eat again. That is an indicator that you could be very susceptible to an infection. And that is why so many people who were cardiometabolically unstable during COVID often were the ones that were most at risk. And often some of those people, unfortunately, lost their lives. So it's really important for us to pay attention to leptin. Leptin, I call the leader of the metabolism in your body. Okay. So, what does it lead? It tells you when to eat and it tells you when not to eat by upregulating or downregulating, turning on or turning off. It's also critically important to your cardiovascular system. And if you recall, if you look at death rates, many people suffer from cardiometabolic issues and cardiac issues, whether it's arrhythmia, heart attacks. They have angina, they have heartburn, all of those things, right? Anything that has to do with poor circulation, even diabetes is tied into your circulatory system. So we want that hormone leptin to be working really well, or guess what? We're not going to have all that we need to be able to keep our heart and our circulation protected. So let's look now at what happens to your heart if you don't have enough leptin. Remember, it's the leader that we're talking about today. And our acronym again is Leaders Act Right. So leptin will cause your heart, if you don't have enough leptin in your body, to become floppy, which I thought was a really interesting way of describing it when I was reading this book. But it does create an image, right? So old people, I think sometimes you think, oh, as I age, I'm going to have sagging skin, or I'm going to have loose muscles, or there's going to be flab on my body, whether it's skin or fat. Well, guess what? You have to go inside too and think, oh no, if my leptin is not sensitive, if I'm not producing it the way I need to, the muscle around my heart as I age will also become flabby. And if you think this only happens to old people, you're wrong, because right now what we're seeing is a cardiometabolic crisis in America. We're seeing young people ending up with what we would consider to be diseases of old age. And so we know that it's more than the number of years that you're living, it's the way you're living your life. So nobody wants a floppy heart. You want your heart to be a really strong muscle that pumps lots of blood throughout your body. And you want that muscle to be really, really intact. You don't want it to be floppy. So you need leptin for that. People with higher blood levels of leptin continue to preserve more normal dimensions of their heart as they age. Okay, so that's the leader. I want you to remember two things about leptin. Number one, it leads your metabolism. It tells your body when to eat and when not to eat. And number two, it protects your heart. It keeps you from having a floppy heart. And I'm actually going to add a third one, and that is it creates a good environment for a healthy immune response. So it's going to keep you from getting an infection. Okay, so that's the leadership that leptin provides. Now let's talk about action. That's the second thing in Leaders Act Right. So action deals with adiponectin. Adiponectin is the primary fat hormone that shapes your metabolism. Okay, so if L, leptin, is the leader, then A, adiponectin, is the army that is being led by the leptin. All right, its job is to make sure that things run smoothly in the fuel uptake department. Okay, so this army of metabolites, right, this hormone called adiponectin, is there to tell you how much fuel you need right now. So I want you to think about your day and when you might need fuel. When you wake up in the morning, you've actually used a lot, hopefully. You've tapped into your fat stores, you've burned through your glucose, you've burned through your glycogen, and you have tapped into your fat stores. So when you wake up in the morning, you really shouldn't need to eat because you're actually working off food that is something you pulled out of your fat the night before. So I and many others have recommended not eating the first thing in the morning when waking. It's better to just allow your body to continue to use the fuel that it used during the fasting period and break your fast a little bit later. So, for example, if you were to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, you may want to wait 2 or 3 hours before you have your first meal. That might be actually a good longevity plan. You can drink coffee, you can drink green tea, you can drink black tea or water. That's all fine. You can even take salt into your body. But we're talking about getting fuel. Remember, adiponectin is this army that gets to your fuel. Let it do its job in terms of getting some of the stores that you have in your body being put into use. So you're just not storing more and storing more and storing more. Okay, he goes on to say, there's always some glucose in your bloodstream to provide fuel, to keep the lights on and your organs running all day long. This baseline glucose is known as your fasting blood sugar. So when you go to the doctor, you may be thinking like, what exactly is fasting blood sugar? So if you don't eat for a certain number of hours, your body, because of adiponectin, is going to keep a certain amount of glucose in your body just to keep your body running, not necessarily to run a marathon or build a house or even manage your life as just an everyday 2025 individual, right? Not that, just to keep your body going. Okay, so that's fasting blood sugar. I think it's important for us to know what these things are when we go to the doctor and they tell us, oh, I checked this and I checked that. But why? Why is that important? Well, I'll tell you why. Because it tells you if your adiponectin is working properly. So Adiponectin's job is to ensure your blood glucose is always at a normal level. So let's say, for example, you're having fun with your friends and you decide that you're either going to live it up. What is that for you? Is it drinking too much? Is it eating too much? Is it too much sugar? You're going to rush your bloodstream with all kinds of extra glucose. And it's adiponectin's job to signal to your body how to get rid of that, because too much glucose in your body, if your body is working right, is a bad thing, and it's going to know it's a bad thing. It's going to start to turn it off. So what does it do? It interacts with insulin. And I know we talk a lot about insulin, but let's go a little bit deeper and learn more about insulin. So adiponectin's job is to ensure that your blood glucose is always at normal levels. It controls the effects of insulin. All right. So let's just remember that it controls the effects of insulin. So you eat sugar, you produce insulin to counterbalance the sugar. What does the adiponectin do? It goes in and it controls what is the aftermath. Okay, what is the effect of that dance between glucose and insulin? So that is, by the way, insulin, in case you don't know, which is fine, is a metabolic hormone made by your pancreas. Okay, so insulin is there when we're stressed out. Insulin is there when we have a lot of glucose in our body. So it comes in to kind of regulate things, but it's the adiponectin that actually deals with the aftermath of what happened. So when your cells lose their responsiveness to insulin, so for example, you hear about people who are insulin resistant, right? So they eat a lot of sugar, they don't produce any insulin at all. Or in the case of diabetics, sometimes they have too much insulin and then they need sugar to counterback the insulin. You want those two things to kind of be balancing each other. And when they don't work, they don't do that job. So your blood glucose levels could begin to rise abnormally to high levels, and your cells can't suck up the fuel, right? It's like the gates have opened up and you're getting flooded with sugar and it can't properly metabolize it. So, what happens as a result of that is that your adiponectin is going to really, really work overtime. Oops, I'm losing. Speaking of fuel, I'm losing fuel for my computer. So I've got to plug it in. All right. I'm the adiponectin in that example, right? I'm dealing with the aftermath. So I'm not having enough energy. I'm getting the proper electricity to my computer. So maybe that came in right at the perfect time. So what do we do next? We have our adiponectin. It's balancing the aftermath. If you have too much insulin, you can have lots of different problems and put too much stress on your organs, too much stress on your cardiovascular system, can actually shut down completely your immune response. So adiponectin is actually anti-inflammatory. What it does is when you have high levels of it in your bloodstream, meaning sugar, the fat hormone protects your entire body from inflammation. It shields the lining of your blood vessels from being scalded by inflammation. So I never thought of it that way. So just think, when you have all that sugar running through your body, and if you don't have enough insulin to deal with it, and you have good adiponectin response, the adiponectin will go in and cool down the system, right? So that you don't have too much inflammation. But guess what? A lot of us don't have enough adiponectin in our bodies either. And this is where that Goldilocks point is so important, that we have just enough fat to do all this work, because it's doing a lot of work, but not too much so that we are resisting all of these hormones and what they're supposed to do. We don't want to give them too much work to do. Just enough. You want to have just enough. That's the Goldilocks point. Okay. So body fat is the factory of adiponectin. So you would think, right? I thought this was interesting, that so you need enough of it to have right, to have that metabolism. People who are obese have plenty of fat. So you would think they also have plenty of adiponectin. However, the obesity causes malfunctions because excess fat can make normal levels of adiponectin drop. I was really surprised by this. I would think the more fat you had, the more ability you have to produce adiponectin, but it's not true. In obesity, we're more likely to see low levels of adiponectin and higher levels of inflammation throughout the body, which poses a danger because many of the worst chronic diseases show high inflammation. So, let's go back and review again. Our leaders, what do? That's the leptin. Our leaders go in and they tell us to be full. You ate enough. Okay. That's really important. Protects the heart, protects your immune system. Our adiponectin is the army that goes in and deals with the balance between insulin and sugar so that you don't end up with too much inflammation in the body. So it's anti inflammatory and it also helps to process the sugar that's in your blood, and it tells your body how much glucose is necessary to stay alive. Now, the third thing in Leaders Act Right is resistant. So let's talk about the third hormone that we're focusing on today that's produced by your fat. Resistant, it's the third major hormone. It fines tunes the effect of adiponectin by countering the adiponectin's effect. So all of these hormones have checks and balances, which I think is so cool, right? So you have the insulin that counters the glucose, and then you have adiponectin that deals with the insulin, and now you have resistant that deals with adiponectin. How cool is this? It's like this beautiful dance. Everybody comes in and does their job. I love the body and the way it works. All right. So, how does it do this? It comes in after all of this is done. Inflammation up, inflammation down, sugar in, sugar out, fasting, eating, all of this stuff that goes on. And resistant comes in and says, do we have any injuries? Do we have any stress that's occurred in the body? Do we need to repair things? And it triggers the production of stem cells. And this is really important. We've talked about this in our longevity talk so much, right? You want those stem cells to be reproduced at the youngest possible model that we can, right? So if you have good stem cell production in your body, you're going to see good repair. So it recruits stem cells to help repair heart muscle, right? So you don't have a flabby heart and your damaged organs. And you might think, well, how do I have damaged organs if I'm just walking around and living my life day to day, not thinking, not doing anything too strenuous, not doing anything too dramatic? But the truth is that just living and being in an environment with lots of chemicals, being in an environment with lots of stress, being in an environment with food that's depleted of nutrients and has additional chemicals that is hard for the body to deal with is producing a lot of damage in your body. And the one thing that you have to work on that repair is resistant. So, what can it do? It can release more from your fat, right? So, when you see a lot of damage, your body will release more resistant and it can help to support your health defenses. So, it's going to be the one that sets it right. All right. Leaders act right. So, leptin is going to lead your body into healthy metabolism. Adiponectin is going to tell your body what to do and what not to do. And resistant is going to come in and level everything off, make sure everything is tied up nice and neat after that whole process, and fix anything that may have been broken or damaged in the process. So, when we carry too much fat in the body, the factory and mission control centers for these hormones are thrown into chaos. And when we don't carry enough fat on our body, we don't have the ability to produce these crucial hormones. I want you to think of obesity or being overweight as having too many cooks in the kitchen, right? There's just too many things going on, and you want to simplify. And just think of being underweight as not having enough cooks in the kitchen. You just don't have what you need to keep your body going. Now, next week, we're going to talk about fat as a space heater, which I think is kind of cool. But hopefully, Leaders Act Right is an easy way for you to remember the important roles that fat has in your body's hormone production, and the fact that when we talk about longevity, we're really talking about maintaining a healthy weight and maintaining really good heart health, as well as a proper immune response so that we don't get sick or more importantly, end up with a chronic disease that's harder and harder to fight as we age. So, here's to breaking the limits of age and living each day with vitality. Keep thriving, and I'll see you in the next episode of Radical Age Reversal.